Speaking of our next guest, we have him right here. Jeremy Bromberg is the Chief Operating Officer of CanWell. CanWell is located in Rhode Island in the Massachusetts area, and we're very excited to have you on today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm humbled to be included. Thank you.
It's very nice of you to say that, Jeremy. And I'm looking forward to hearing about CanWell. Why don't you tell us first what CanWell is all about?
Sure. CanWell actually represents investors. It's sort of an investment vehicle for the people who own two medical marijuana companies, one in Massachusetts called Affinity, one in Rhode Island called Summit Medical Compassion Center. So CanWell itself is very, very small. It's just like three of us who are really kind of overlooking the portfolio. And in my case, given a lot of operations background, I'm working with both companies to help them grow and be more successful. In this case, when I arrived about almost 2.5 years ago, Summit in Rhode Island was already operational for about 5 years. So that was a case of let's give it some gas. And the Affinity in Massachusetts was just starting being built from the ground up. There was one employee and there was a building with a roof and a floor. So since then, we've got that Affinity completely built out and operational with two different dispensaries, one in West Springfield and one in Boston.
Well, that's fantastic. I know a lot of work goes into that. And you're somebody that has a great background in not so much the cannabis industry to start with, and you've been able to bridge the gap between between both of those industries. So what I wanted to ask as my next question over here and hear a little bit more about is, what are some of the strategic initiatives that you're trying to, roll out over the next year or the next few years?
There's a couple answers to that. One is I'm not going to duck it. I will answer, but part of it is it's hard to answer because we have no idea where this industry is going. We don't know if the federal laws are going to change. We don't know if the state's going to change. We don't know if regulations will change. They do routinely. So a lot of it is we're trying to predict where this is going. And frankly, if it gets to the point in the country where the walls between states come down, then this is a very different industry all of a sudden, because a lot of it can be grown cheaper outdoors versus much of the country having all these indoor grow facilities. So there's that aspect that says you don't really know where it's going. But on the other hand, the part to answer more directly is part of it is we have to learn to control expenses over time, because the price of product will come down. We're not we're in a demand undersupplied area right now. So that allows pricing to stay high, but more and more folks are coming online. So product will start to become more available, prices will come down, and then we have to compete on price. So a big part of the message is going to be, how do you control your costs in a indoor grow and expensive activity to allow you to be competitive in that realm? Similarly, we have to look at what products we're offering and how to maintain a level of quality and variety that will attract business, and to be successful on both the medical and eventually on the adult use fronts as well. Right now, we are both companies are just medical marijuana, but Rhode Island will probably be going recreational somewhere in the next year, and Massachusetts, it's up to us to apply to get that, and that's coming up for us as well. So a lot of it is just sustaining the growth, sustaining the quality, keep it going, and be there. So it's not yet. I mean, I like to joke too that I've had to do some sales in this job, which has never been my history, not my specialty at all. But in this job, I'm really good at sales, because I show up with someone, I go, "You want this?" And they go, "Yes," like that. I mean, I've had hundreds of thousands of dollars agreed to in 2 minutes. So, all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, I did a good job pitching it. No, it's just a product that people want.
Well, it always helps to be in an industry where there's a lot of demand, but you're also describing an industry that's on the front end of the curve. We could call it an immature industry, which means there's a lot, as you've described, of change going on. How do you build a culture, and I would assume that's important, that deals with it, where you're going to have to adapt so quickly all the time to survive? I think that's key, because, what do they say? Culture beats strategy 3-1. And right now, I think, it is about people understanding that the rules are going to be changing almost daily, weekly, monthly right now. So how do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, as you can tell simply by looking at me, I have been worked in business a long time. And I'm here to
I
tell you.
didn't call you old.
No, you didn't. But I get the hair dyed this color. What are you going to do? But anyway, no. So but I've been in business a long time. To say it's an immature industry is an understatement. There are most of the industry leaders fall into one of two categories, most, not all. They either are people who want to grow and sell marijuana, just, grow and sell it because there's money to be made. Or there are, as some people will say, the suits who know that there's money to be made and want to get in and get their mitts on it and build a business. Neither is terribly effective for what this business is right now. Because exactly the point you were making, Jeffrey, is you have to be adaptable, you have to be agile, because the rules change constantly. I think in the Massachusetts company here at Affinity, I think we did a very good job because we hired a blend of business savvy and cannabis culture, because you really need those two to come together, because cannabis does have a whole cultural aspect to it as well. So you're looking at how do you build a sensible business and one that can appeal to the industry. So we've looked at a lot of I'll say, classic industry best practices. I've been with two different companies. The first one I was with, I suggested we get an ERP, and they just looked at me like I had 4 heads and said, "What do you need that for?" And I said, "Well, because we want to make smarter management decisions, don't we? And I want all the data linked." No clue about anything like that. They just sort of, again, stared at me like I had 4 heads. So you run into these things constantly. And so what you can do is just be steady, be adaptable, be creative, realize, what your goal is, where are you trying to get, and then realize there are a million different ways to get there. You can always find a way to solve a problem, I believe. So you look at where you're trying to go and you just say, where am I now? Where do I want to be? What's between here and there? And you do that routinely, which I think is what you do in business anyway.
Absolutely. And I know, you were talking, and something that just kind of, popped up in my head that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are really going to want to kind of hear an answer to, but how does working in the cannabis industry as a CFO differ than working not in the cannabis industry?
Okay, well, first a disclaimer, I'm not a CFO. And I like to say I know how to spell gap, but it kind of ends there. But what I would tell a CFO, there's a few things that come into play here that are very important. The first is IRS code 280E, which is the IRS code for taxes that must be paid on the sale of Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 substances. So believe it or not, they will collect taxes on things that are sold illegally. So that 280E is you talk to 5 CPAs, you'll get 5 different answers on what it actually says, because it isn't particularly clear. But the core element of that is cost of goods is deductible, cost of sales is not. So we have basically a tax rate, an effective tax rate that's probably between 40 and 50%, because we don't get the same deductions that other businesses do. The second thing for a CFO is this is absolutely a very inventory-driven business. So need to have the strengths in that area. And frankly, you'll want to get to where you're doing activity-based costing, because there's enough activities here to make it worth doing, and that will contribute to ultimately managing to control your expenses in the production side. But there's more to it than that, because in some cases, for example, when Massachusetts started, and still the case in Rhode Island, when Massachusetts first had medical marijuana, a medical marijuana company had to be fully vertically integrated, meaning you had to do everything from planting a seed all the way to the day the product was sold. You grew it, you extracted it, you cooked it, you packaged it, you have to do all that yourself. And originally, the regulations specified that company had to be a nonprofit, not a 501c3, but a business nonprofit. So, but basically you could have no owner. So you then had someone hold the license, but they don't own that nonprofit. Then there were all these management companies, which are really where the investors come through, that set up management contracts with the nonprofits to provide people, services, intellect, everything else at a hefty cost, because that's how they get the money out of the nonprofit. That law went away in Massachusetts, so the medical marijuana can be for profits now. Rhode Island, the medical marijuana is still nonprofits, and in other states, you'll find cannabis companies are nonprofits, and that makes a whole nother level of accounting challenge, because you're really balancing at least 2 sets of books.
Yeah, Jeremy, there's a fair amount of financial people, on this Zoom seminar training session, as we would call it, for FEI. Let's
Mhm.
not forget that. And sometimes CFOs are a little bit more conservative. They like to go to more stable industries or industries that are really on the curve. So if I was a CFO and I wanted to get into this business, is there any advice you would give them?
Number one thing is, how well capitalized are they? This is an extremely expensive business to get going. Quick funny story. When Massachusetts first voted in medical in 2012, in 2013, the consultants descended on Massachusetts from Colorado to start talking to would-be owners and telling them, you're going to be able to get open for 3 to 5 million. And my answer to that is they were off by 1, and that's the one that goes in front of the 3 or the 5.
Wow.
Yes, to start a vertically integrated cannabis business now is probably 15 to 20 million up front.
Evan, you're out.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that the money's there. Then if you're going to a company that's already in motion, then I would take a look at their cash flow. Are they being sensible? I mean, these companies should quickly be cash flow positive. They should have a level of profitability quickly. If they don't, something's wrong.
Wow. Evan, you had another question?
Yeah, I mean, I know since you joined your company, I know that you guys have done phenomenally well. And I just wanted to ask you, since this is on entrepreneurship, what you feel your key factors of success has been since you joined with CanWell.
Business experience and determination. I mean, you just have to be dogged, but you also have to be adaptable, which I don't believe in. I'm really good at designing process. I just don't like following it. So I can be adaptable that way and think about, how do we have to get there? But it's just soldiering through, because you're having to get through, all the construction, all the regulation, and that doesn't stop, and inspections and everything. So you just have to be dogged. I mean,
sometimes it's not that complicated. And I love the two things you said. When you say dogged, I always tell entrepreneurs, I'm looking for somebody who knows how to run through brick walls and not stop in front of them. That's the dogged. The adaptable, I always say it's the survival of the adaptable, not the fittest. And so I agree with you 100%. We're totally aligned. Jeremy, again, very exciting industry, so much to learn from it, so much that's going to happen in the next 2 to 5 years. It's going to change. But if somebody wants to know more about you and your company and how, what you're doing, how would they find you?
I think the easiest way is just via LinkedIn. My name is here on the bottom of the screen, Jeremy Bromberg. You can find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message or whatever, and I'll be happy to converse with anybody. It's
Bromberg, not Bloomberg.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah. Evan, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. It was a pleasure being able to interview you today.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeremy.